You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250. This is where we remember events that took place 250 years ago this week. It is a short bonus episode from the American Revolution podcast to remember these important 250th anniversaries from the Revolutionary War. This week we remember the actual signing of the Declaration of Independence, which took place on August 2nd, 1776. We all know that the original Declaration of Independence was dated July 4th, 1776. That was the day Congress approved the wording of the Declaration. At that point, the document went to a printer to make copies that didn't have any signatures other than perhaps those of John Hancock, the President of Congress, and Charles Thompson, who was the Secretary of Congress. A few days later, New York finally agreed to the Declaration, causing Congress to add the word unanimous to the final document. Over the next few weeks, the document was reprinted all over the country, but there was no original or official copy. The document that we think of as the original was drafted later. On July 19th, Congress approved to have the text, quote, fairly engrossed on parchment so that all of the members could sign it. There is some question as to who actually wrote the words on the parchment that we today consider the original Declaration of Independence, but based on handwriting analysis, most historians believe the draftsman was Timothy Matlack of Pennsylvania. At the time, Matlack was the clerk to the Secretary of the Second Continental Congress, Charles Thompson. Congress set aside time to sign the document on Friday, August 2nd. By this time, thousands of printed copies were circulating all over the country. The official record on the signing consists of a single sentence in the minutes of the Continental Congress. It just says, "The Declaration of Independence being engrossed and compared at the table was signed." We all know that President John Hancock signed with a particularly large signature in the center of the document, just below the main text. Popular lore says that he announced to Congress that he was signing his name so large so that King George III could read it without his glasses. And most folk think this is apocryphal and didn't really happen. All the other delegates grouped their names together by state. There are 6 columns of signatures with a general geographical arrangement, the southern states on the left and the northern states on the right. That makes the organization a little sloppy since there are only 3 Georgia signatures in the first column, while there are 13 signatures for New England in the 6th column. Pennsylvania had the most signatures of any state. They had 9 people sign the document. This was because the new delegation replaced most of the old delegates, and this transition took place between July 4th and August 2nd, so members of both the old and new delegations signed. Most states only have about 3 signers. There were only 50 delegates on July 4th, and 9 of them refused to sign at all. Among those who did not sign were George Clinton of New York, who later became Vice President of the United States, John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, who later served as President of both Delaware and Pennsylvania at different times, Robert Livingston of New York, later became Chancellor of New York, and he also was Minister to France, and Thomas Willing of Pennsylvania, who later headed the First Bank of the United States. One of the Pennsylvania delegates who did sign was Robert Morris. Morris, of course, had refused to vote for independence when the vote was taken on July 2nd. At the time of signing, he allegedly said, "I'm not one of those politicians that run testy when my own plans are not adopted. I think it's the duty of a good citizen to follow when he cannot lead." We aren't certain, but our best guess is that only 49 men signed on August 2nd. Most of the others who signed later were away from Congress at the time. Quite a few of those who did sign had joined Congress since July 4th and hadn't been part of the decision to adopt it. Some delegates signed well after August 2nd. Most of those who signed later just didn't happen to be present in Congress on that day, and many of them signed over the next few days or weeks. We don't really have a good record of when people signed. We do know that Matthew Thornton of New Hampshire did not even join Congress until November 4th, but still signed it anyway. We believe that Thomas McKean of Delaware was probably the last person to sign. His signature does not appear on a reprint of signatures that was published in 1777. He didn't have any objection to signing, but he had already left Congress by the time August 2nd came around for signing, and he was leading a regiment of Delaware militia in battle. It's possible that McKean did not sign until several years later. We only know that he was on the list by 1781, when another publication listed all of the signers, including McKean. In total, 56 men signed the Declaration, pledging their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more context on this story, please check out episode 99 of the American Revolution podcast at blog.amrevpodcast.com. And please subscribe for free to the whole podcast on whatever platform you like. Thanks again for listening to this Revolution 250 moment on the American Revolution podcast.